On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Lucy Gordon, an English actress and former model, died tragically by suicide on May 20, 2009, just 2 days before her 29th birthday. She was found in her Paris apartment, a city that symbolized both opportunity and isolation for many young artists. Her death, ruled as self-inflicted by hanging, stunned those who knew her personally and professionally, coming at a time when she seemed poised for broader recognition in the film industry. Gordon's passing came just after completing a portrayal of famed British singer Jane Birkin in the biopic Gainsbourg, A Heroic Life. Her performance, later praised posthumously, revealed a depth of talent and emotional range that hinted at a bright career ahead. In this light, her death underscored the mental health struggles often masked by outward success, particularly within high-pressure creative industries. It reflected a wider societal challenge of the early 21st century, an increased awareness, but still insufficient support for mental wellness, especially among young professionals navigating fame and identity. The immediate consequences of her passing were both intimate and symbolic. Tributes poured in from directors and co-stars who recalled her as generous, intelligent, and deeply committed to her craft. The film she last worked on became a quiet elegy to her talent, with critics noting the poignancy of her role and how her real-life fate echoed the emotional turbulence of the character she portrayed. While Gordon did not live long enough to become a household name, her death contributed to broader conversations around the toll of celebrity culture and the fragility of young lives in the spotlight. Her story joined a growing list of gifted performers whose private pain stood in stark contrast to their public personas, reminding society of the human cost behind art and fame. In death, Lucy Gordon became a figure of reflection, of beauty, promise, and unspoken battles. We remember her not through grand monuments, but in the lingering emotion she brought to the screen, the roles she inhabited, and the sadness of potential left unrealized. Through film, journalism, and online tribute spaces, she is quietly immortalized, a testament to how even brief lives can leave enduring echoes. Her story is a somber reminder that remembrance is not reserved for legends alone, but extends to those whose vulnerability touches our collective conscience. Randy Macho Man Savage, one of professional wrestling's most electrifying figures, died on May 20, 2011, from a sudden heart attack while driving in Seminole, Florida. He was 58. His death, though natural in medical terms, was made tragic by its timing. He lost control of his vehicle, crashed into a tree, and died at the scene. His wife, Lynn, who was in the car with him, survived with only minor injuries. Savage's passing was not only a personal tragedy, but also a cultural shock for fans who had grown up watching his larger-than-life persona dominate wrestling in the 1980s and 1990s. Savage's death came during a time when the wrestling world was already grappling with questions about health, substance use, and the physical toll of the sport. As one of the most intense and physically committed performers in the ring, Savage embodied the extremes to which professional wrestlers pushed themselves during an era before widespread discussions of wellness and long-term care in the industry. His sudden death reignited conversations about the well-being of aging athletes, particularly those who, like Savage, had lived fast and hard during their peak years. The immediate aftermath of his passing was marked by an outpouring of grief and nostalgia. Wrestlers, fans, and media outlets celebrated not only his wrestling career, with its iconic feuds, dramatic promos, and unforgettable charisma, but also his crossover appeal in pop culture, from Slim Jim commercials to his appearances in film and television. His unique voice, flashy outfits, and unpredictable energy made him unforgettable. Savage's death did amplify his legend. Though he had been somewhat estranged from WWE in his later years, his legacy was soon embraced in full. He was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015, an honor that formally acknowledged his monumental impact on the sport. In remembering Randy Savage, we see how mortality catches even the seemingly invincible. Yet, we also see the human desire to transform fleeting life into enduring myth. Through tribute videos, action figures, and viral clips, Savage remains alive in the collective memory of fans. His death, like his career, was sudden and dramatic. But in death, as in life, the Macho Man continues to fly off the top rope of time, frozen in glory. Niki Lauda, the legendary Austrian Formula One driver and aviation entrepreneur, died on May 20, 2019, at the age of 70. His death, caused by complications related to a lung transplant he had undergone months earlier, marked the end of a life defined by resilience, precision, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. Though his passing was natural, it was deeply symbolic of the physical toll that high-stakes racing and the choices made in the name of speed can exact on the human body. Lauda had already become a symbol of survival decades earlier when he miraculously returned to racing just 6 weeks after a near-fatal crash at the Nürburgring in 1976. Suffering severe burns and lung damage, Lauda's recovery and return to the track were nothing short of heroic. This singular act of willpower and determination defined not only his character, but the spirit of a sport in which danger and death are constant companions. His story became a mirror of the 1970s era of Formula One, raw, unregulated, and often perilous, when drivers were gladiators as much as athletes. The immediate consequences of Lauda's death reverberated beyond motorsport. Tributes poured in from world leaders, racing teams, and fans alike, highlighting the rare crossover appeal he held as both a sportsman and businessman. His legacy as a 3-time Formula One world champion was secure, but it was his second act as the founder of Lauda Air and a key figure in aviation safety that further elevated his mythos. His technical insights helped shape modern F1 racing, and his mentorship of drivers like Lewis Hamilton ensured his influence would endure. Lauda's death amplified his legend, casting him not just as a champion, but as a figure who transcended sport through grit and intellect. In film, his rivalry with James Hunt was immortalized in Rush, 2013, bringing his dramatic story to a new generation. Museums, documentaries, and Formula One commemorations continue to honor his contributions. Ultimately, Niki Lauda's death reminds us that mortality spares no one, not even those who seem to defy it. Yet through storytelling, memorials, and the perpetuation of their ideals, figures like Lauda achieve a kind of immortality. They are remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived, and how they inspired others to rise beyond fear and limitation. Carol Mann, a towering figure in women's golf, both literally and figuratively, passed away on May 20, 2018, at the age of 77. Her death, from natural causes at her home in the Woodlands, Texas, marked the end of a life that had long championed not only athletic excellence, but also the growth of women's professional sports. Mann's passing, though peaceful, serves as a reflective lens on the cultural shifts surrounding women in sports during the 20th century, and the gradual but persistent push toward equality. Rising to prominence in the 1960s, Mann's career flourished during a time when female athletes were often overshadowed and underfunded. With 38 LPGA Tour victories, including 2 major championships, She wasn't just a prolific winner, she was a powerful voice and advocate for women's golf. Her leadership role as president of the LPGA from 1973 to 1976 was pivotal in shaping the tour's professionalism and financial sustainability. Her death, while not shocking in the way of a public tragedy, reverberated deeply through the world of women's athletics. It was a reminder of a generation that laid the groundwork for the opportunities modern female athletes enjoy today. The immediate aftermath of her death prompted tributes from across the sports world, especially from the LPGA, which credited her as a mentor, pioneer, and foundational figure. Her legacy was celebrated not just through accolades, but through the lived experiences of women now thriving in competitive golf. In this way, her passing served to amplify her legend, highlighting not just what she achieved with a club in hand, but what she built through her voice and vision. Carol Mann's death reveals a subtler truth about how societies remember trailblazers. Through the institutions they help shape, the voices they inspire, and the battles they fought, often outside the spotlight. She may not have dominated headlines the way political figures or entertainers did, but her impact rippled quietly and profoundly through time. Today, we commemorate figures like Mann through halls of fame, youth foundations, and stories that continue to underscore the long road to equity in sport. In remembering her, we honor not only her triumphs, but the transformative power of perseverance, dignity, and leadership in an evolving cultural landscape. Billy Cannon, a legendary figure in American football, died of natural causes on May 20, 2018, at the age of 80. His passing marked the end of a life defined by both athletic triumph and human complexity, reflecting the evolving nature of celebrity and redemption in 20th century America. Cannon first rose to national fame as a running back at Louisiana State University, where his Halloween night punt return against Ole Miss in 1959 became one of the most iconic plays in college football history. He won the Heisman Trophy that year, solidifying his status as a Southern sports hero during a time when college athletics were becoming deeply entwined with regional identity and American culture. His death came in an era when the sporting world increasingly embraced not only the celebration of athletic excellence, but also honest reckonings with personal struggles. In the decades following his football career, Cannon's life took a dramatic turn. He was convicted in the 1980s for counterfeiting, serving prison time, a fall from grace that stunned fans and tarnished his public image. Yet, unlike many disgraced public figures, Cannon's story didn't end in ignominy. After serving his sentence, he found redemption by working as the chief dentist at the Louisiana State Penitentiary, using his skills to serve others and rebuild his life. This arc, from stardom to scandal to service, made his death more than just the loss of an athlete. It was the passing of a figure whose life mirrored broader American themes of reinvention and second chances. The immediate response to Cannon's death was one of reverence and reflection. LSU held tributes, and fans recalled not just his Heisman moment, but his journey of fallibility and humility. His death did not so much amplify a legend as it reaffirmed a nuanced legacy, reminding the public that greatness can coexist with imperfection. Billy Cannon's life and death reveal how society negotiates memory, morality, and identity. In a culture that often demands perfection from its heroes, his story stands as a reminder that redemption can shape legacy just as powerfully as victory. Through statues, documentaries, and stories passed down among LSU faithful, Cannon is remembered not just as a football icon, but as a man who lived, stumbled, and stood again, making his memory enduring, human, and deeply American. Robin Gibb, one-third of the legendary Bee Gees, died on May 20, 2012 at the age of 62, following a prolonged battle with cancer. His death marked the silencing of one of the most distinctive voices in pop music, and brought to a close an era that saw the Bee Gees rise from modest beginnings to global superstardom. Gibb's passing from natural causes, specifically colorectal and liver cancer, mirrored the era's increasing public conversations about health, aging, and the mortality of icons who had once seemed larger than life. As a defining figure in the disco revolution of the 1970s, Robin, along with his brothers Barry and Maurice, helped shape a musical and cultural movement that both captivated and polarized audiences. At their height, the Bee Gees were the heartbeat of the Saturday Night Fever era, a symbol of escapism, glamour, and a rapidly globalizing music industry. Robin's falsetto vocals became synonymous with hits like "Stayin' Alive" and "How Deep Is Your Love," songs that transcended the dance floor to become anthems of a generation. Robin's death, following that of his twin brother Maurice in 2003, left Barry as the last surviving Gibb brother. The emotional impact was palpable among fans and fellow musicians. His passing didn't shift history in the geopolitical sense, but it did deepen a cultural mourning, a collective farewell to a time when the Bee Gees dominated the airwaves and influenced the evolution of pop, soul, and R&B. His death also triggered a re-evaluation of the Bee Gees' legacy, once mocked during disco's backlash, but later celebrated as pioneers of modern pop. The immediate response to Robin's passing included tributes across the world, from candlelight vigils in his hometown to musical homages from artists he had influenced. His contributions were recognized not just for their chart success, but for their emotional resonance and artistic innovation. Robin Gibb's death reminds us how closely music and memory intertwine in our understanding of mortality. Through timeless melodies, museum exhibits, and biographical retrospectives, we continue to honor his life. In doing so, we affirm humanity's desire to immortalize those who touch our souls, not just through what they achieve, but through the emotion they leave behind. Robin's voice may have faded, but the harmony he helped create still echoes. Stephen J. Gould, one of the most influential evolutionary biologists and public intellectuals of the 20th century, died on May 20, 2002, at the age of 60, from a rare form of lung cancer known as metastatic adenocarcinoma. His death, though natural, followed an earlier fierce battle with abdominal mesothelioma in 1982, a cancer often linked to asbestos exposure, which he miraculously survived for 2 decades. That initial experience led him to write the now famous essay, "The Median Isn't the Message," a reflection on statistical survival rates and human hope in the face of grim prognoses. It became a testament to his capacity to merge science with deeply personal and philosophical insights. Gould's death occurred at a time when public discourse around science and religion, evolution and education was intensifying in the United States. As a powerful advocate for evolutionary theory and a critic of creationism and intelligent design, his passing was a blow to the scientific community. He had long been a vocal figure in cultural debates, not only advancing his own theory of punctuated equilibrium, co-developed with Niles Eldredge, but also bringing complex scientific ideas to lay audiences through essays and books like The Panda's Thumb and Wonderful Life. The immediate aftermath of his death saw tributes from across disciplines: biology, paleontology, history of science, and education. His colleagues mourned the loss of a scholar who was as much a storyteller as a scientist, someone who saw science not as a collection of facts, but as a deeply human endeavor filled with contingency, narrative, and wonder. While his theories sparked debate, they also pushed evolutionary biology into new arenas of thought, challenging traditional Darwinian views and encouraging a richer appreciation for the role of chance and sudden change in natural history. Gould's death did not halt scientific progress, but it marked the end of an era where science communicators held a unique role in shaping public understanding. His voice was irreplaceable, a rare blend of academic rigor and literary grace. In remembering Stephen J. Gould, we see how society clings to those who bridge intellect and imagination. Through documentaries, educational curricula, and continued references in scientific literature, Gould is immortalized not just for what he knew, but for how he inspired others to think critically about life, time, and the fragile, magnificent story of evolution itself. Christopher Columbus, the famed Genoese navigator whose voyages reshaped global history, died on May 20, 1506, in Valladolid, Spain. His death was natural, attributed to complications from reactive arthritis, a painful condition likely exacerbated by years of physical strain during his explorations. Unlike the glory that marked his early voyages, Columbus's final years were shadowed by disappointment. Stripped of the titles and wealth promised by the Spanish crown, he died largely disillusioned, still convinced he had discovered the edge of Asia, not a new world. Columbus's death reflected the shifting tides of power and perception in the Age of Discovery. At the dawn of the 16th century, Spain was rising as a global empire, eager to consolidate authority and riches. Though Columbus initiated this expansive trajectory, his confrontations with Spanish officials and brutal governance in the colonies led to his fall from grace. His passing marked not the end of exploration, but the beginning of a broader European colonial enterprise that would reshape continents and decimate indigenous populations. The immediate consequences of Columbus's death were muted. His family fought to reclaim promised titles and estates in the courts of Spain for years. Yet over time, the legend of Columbus grew, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries, as he was reimagined by various Western powers as a heroic symbol of bold discovery and civilization. His voyages became a cornerstone in the narrative of Western expansion, a framing that often ignored or obscured the violent exploitation of native peoples that accompanied European colonization. In the centuries that followed, Columbus's legacy became both celebrated and controversial. Commemorated in statues, city names, and the American holiday Columbus Day, he was long held as a paragon of courage and vision. Yet more recent scholarship and activism have challenged this narrative, highlighting the devastating impact his expeditions had on indigenous cultures of the Americas. Columbus's death and evolving legacy reveal humanity's complex relationship with memory and power. History often exalts figures who symbolize conquest and transformation, even when their deeds come with moral contradictions. We immortalize such individuals in monuments and myths, but over time, reinterpretation is inevitable. As society reassesses its heroes, Columbus remains a powerful reminder of how death can freeze a figure in time, but memory is ever shifting, shaped by the values of each new era. Clara Schuman, a towering figure in 19th century European music, died on May 20, 1896 in Frankfurt, Germany, at the age of 76. Her death was natural, brought on by a series of strokes that marked the end of a life filled with both artistic brilliance and profound personal tragedy. As a woman navigating the male-dominated world of classical composition and performance, Clara's final years were reflective of the persistent gender constraints of her time, even as she quietly broke them throughout her life. Clara's era, the Romantic period, was characterized by an idealization of the artist as a tortured genius, and in many ways, she embodied this ideal. Her long widowhood after the death of her husband, composer Robert Schumann, and her subsequent devotion to preserving his legacy while raising their children alone, painted her as both muse and martyr. Yet Clara was far more than a passive figure in someone else's story. She was a virtuoso pianist, composer, and teacher in her own right. Her death, while not sudden or violent, signaled the end of a generation that had witnessed the evolution of music from Beethoven to Brahms, whom Clara championed fervently. The immediate consequences of her passing were subtle but significant. Clara's contributions had already begun to fade from public memory due to prevailing gender biases that prioritized male composers. It wasn't until much later, in the late 20th century, that scholars and performers began to reassess her role, not just as Robert's wife or Brahms' confidant, but as a formidable creative force. Her death did not cause a seismic shift in music history at the time, but her life's work laid a foundation for the eventual recognition of women in classical music. Clara Schuman's legacy illustrates the often slow, retrospective justice granted to figures who challenge societal norms. Her death invites reflection on the historical erasure of women's achievements and the power of cultural memory to reclaim them. Through revived performances of her compositions, biographical studies, and dramatizations in film and literature, Clara has been increasingly celebrated not only for her relationships, but for her talent and resilience. In commemorating Clara, we are reminded that mortality does not silence greatness. It challenges future generations to listen more closely. Her music endures as both testimony and triumph, resonating with anyone who has dared to create despite constraint. Patricia Morrison, the distinguished American actress and singer best known for her commanding presence on the Broadway stage, passed away of natural causes on May 20, 2018, at the remarkable age of 103. Her death marked the quiet end of an era that had witnessed the golden age of musical theater, classic Hollywood, and the resilience of female performers who carved space in an industry often shaped by male authority. Morrison's long life itself was emblematic of a shifting cultural landscape. Rising to fame during the 1940s, she gained cinematic attention in roles opposite stars like Spencer Tracy and appeared in suspenseful noir films. Yet it was on stage, especially as Lily Vanessa Catherine in Cole Porter's Kiss Me, Kate, where Morrison etched her place in history. Her death in the 21st century was not the kind to send shockwaves through the headlines, but for those aware of her impact, it was the loss of a living link to Broadway's golden past. Her passing served as a moment of reflection for the theater community. In her prime, Morrison had been part of a pioneering generation of actresses who commanded roles that were powerful, witty, and musically challenging. At a time when women were often relegated to supporting parts, she embraced characters with agency and presence, reflecting the evolving roles of women in post-war America. Her longevity also symbolized the endurance of art itself, how a performance from decades ago could continue to shape the theatrical canon. Though Morrison's death did not alter the course of history, it reinforced her legend. Retrospectives and tributes emerged, not just celebrating her performances, but re-evaluating the quiet power of performers who, though not always in the popular spotlight, had helped shape cultural memory. Archival footage of her songs and interviews introduced her to new generations, ensuring that her influence would not fade with time. Patricia Morrison's death speaks to the universal human desire to be remembered, especially for contributions made in the ephemeral world of performance. Through cast recordings, revived productions, and theatrical scholarship, she remains immortalized, not in marble or bronze, but in the breath between notes, the resonance of applause, and the enduring power of a well-sung line. Ray Manzaric, co-founder and keyboardist of the iconic rock band The Doors, passed away on May 20, 2013, after battling bile duct cancer. His death, though natural in its medical cause, symbolized the fading of a revolutionary era defined by artistic experimentation, cultural upheaval, and the defiant spirit of the 1960s counterculture. Manzaric's passing not only marked the loss of a gifted musician, but also reflected the challenges of preserving legacy amid changing times. Manzaric's death was a quiet event compared to the explosive life and career he led. As the keyboardist behind the Doors' signature sound, his fusion of rock, blues, and psychedelic influences helped define a generation. The band's meteoric rise, punctuated by Jim Morrison's poetic, often volatile stage presence, embodied the era's confrontation with authority, exploration of freedom, and the search for deeper meaning. The 1960s were fraught with political tensions, social revolutions, and artistic breakthroughs. Manzaric's music was a soundtrack to this turbulent landscape. The immediate consequence of Manzaric's passing was a wave of reflection among fans and musicians alike. It prompted renewed interest in the Doors' legacy, with tributes highlighting how their music broke new ground in both style and substance. His death underscored the passage of time and the inevitable fading of first-hand voices from an era that now feels distant, yet remains influential. Unlike the violent or sudden deaths that sometimes immortalize figures by shock, Manzaric's gradual illness allowed a measured farewell, emphasizing respect and remembrance. This transition from vibrant cultural figure to legend reveals much about humanity's relationship with mortality and memory. Manzaric's death reminded the world that even icons of rebellion age and succumb to the same vulnerabilities as anyone else. Yet the way he is commemorated, through remastered albums, documentaries, biographies, and tribute concerts, shows how society immortalizes its heroes. Art and media become vessels that preserve not just the individual, but the values and emotions they inspired. Ray Manzaric's life and death illustrate how mortality is intertwined with the desire for lasting impact. His musical legacy continues to echo in popular culture, inviting each generation to revisit the dreams and struggles of the 1960s, demonstrating how memory, power, and artistry intertwine to transcend time.